is 1973. The Australian team leave for the West Indies, buoyed up after their success in England in 1972. Although drawing the series 2-2, they had proved that after a drought in Australian cricket, there was a possibility of Australia once again being a force in world cricket. With the experience of Ian Chappell, Ian Redpath, Doug Walters, Ross Edwards and Keith Stackpole, was added the youth of Greg Chappell, Dennis Lilly, John Benno and Jeff Hammond. The selectors had taken the unusual step of including 3 leg spinners, Terry Jenner, Kerry O'Keefe and John Watkins. The tour could have been a disaster. Dennis Lilly broke down with a back injury, Bob Massey was plagued with injury and struggled with form, and Ian Chappell suffered at one stage with a bad ankle injury. With his brother Greg, Ian Redpath and Doug Walters in fine form with the bat, Max Walker, Jeff Hammond, Terry Jenner and at times Kerry O'Keefe lifted Australia to a meritorious 2-0 victory. Ladies and gentlemen, that team achieved 2 great feats. The first is that it went through a tour undefeated. And secondly, it bears the distinction of being the last international cricket team to defeat the West Indies on its home ground since that time, and that's 20 years, a magnificent record. Ladies and gentlemen, on your behalf this evening, and certainly on behalf of the Adelaide City Mission, would you join me please in welcoming Ian Chappell and the 1973 Australian cricket team in the Caribbean. Our next guest is well known to South Australian cricket followers of the 1970s. He's a man who carried our local state attack on numerous occasions and yet never quite rose to the heights we would have hoped for in the international arena. However, tonight we're celebrating the success of the 1973 Test team in the West Indies, and this man's efforts during that tour cannot be underestimated. With Lilly and Massey sidelined, this man carried with Max Walker the burden of the new ball in the heat of the Caribbean, and he performed superbly. It must have been something about that heat that he enjoyed, because he's lived for some 8 years now in Darwin. It's been a long trip down, and please join me in thanking our next guest who's made that trip down to play today and join us tonight, our own Mr. Jeff Hammond. Just one quick question for you, Jeff. You went to England in '72, and you went to the West Indies in '73, and you were only a very young man at that stage. How do you feel about having made 2 tours when you were very young, and then perhaps, albeit through injury, not able to carry that on? Is that a disappointment to you?
It certainly is, Roger. I think the biggest disappointment for me is from the aspect that, firstly, I was the pup on both tours. And if you knew the amount of shit that these blokes used to lay on me, I always look forward to the day that I might become an experienced cat player, so I could give it back to them. Yeah. But 20 years later, and as you only know so well, that what we went through last night, we had just a marvellous night. Because it's amazing when you go through a reunion, you never talk about the good sides, you always talk about the bad sides, all the sides that you want, all the aspects of the game that you always want to forget. And Christ, we had one hell of a night last night. But so that's my disappointment. I haven't had the opportunity to give my own back to these blokes.
Sure. Well, Jeff, here's another chance. What about a story from you?
Well, I'll try and be fairly brief.
Yeah, make it brief, that's fine.
I'm sure you want to hear other speakers. I think it's fair to say that, well, before I go too far, I've got a couple of confessions to make about the tour that I'm sure my own players don't even know about. And that is Bill Jacobs, as those who don't know him that nickname, the governor of Grenada. Remember his wife? She was a lovely lady. Well, somebody pinched her on the arse one night, and TJ copped the rap. And I never ever owned up for it, and God, it was worth it. It was worth it just both to see TJ get it in the gun, and it was also the pinch on the arse wasn't real bad either. And the second thing was that prior to the first Test match that I played in the West Indies, that this is my second confession, is that we played at a place called Montego Bay, and we practiced around about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and then we went back to the hotel where we enjoyed the local company and the local Jamaican rum, and yours truly happened to come down with a fairly heavy cold. And you've heard this story, I know. Anyway, I just couldn't breathe, and so I went to the local big fella that was serving behind the bar, and I said, look mate, have you got something that's going to fix me up? It's not a hair lip story, by the way. You got something that's going to fix me up? He said, no worries man, I can fix you up. He said, you just sit and watch this stuff. And he got out this overproof Jamaican rum, and he poured it into a glass. It was about 2 inches of Jamaican rum, and some Angostura bitters, squeezed some limes and a bit of salt, and he said, righto, down the hatch, man. So I had a little taste, and God, do you reckon that didn't burn my throat? He said, no, man, you got to down the hatch, straight down the hatch. So woof, down the hatch I went. Well, that just tore the first coating of skin off my throat. So I went back to join the boys around the pool, and I felt great for about a half an hour, and the next minute I was starting, I've got this cold again. So I went back to the bloke and said, look mate, I've got this problem with the cold. And he said, no, look, I expected to see you back. He said, no worries. He said, so he poured out the overproof rum, the Angostura bitters, the pinch of salt, and the juice of a couple of limes. He said, now come on man, down the hatch. So down the hatch I went, and there all of a sudden went another coating of skin off the throat. So, by the way, this overproof rum is about 60 or 70% by volume. It's the sort of stuff that you put on the top of a table, and you could put a match about 6 inches above it, and the thing would just ignite straight away. So imagine what it's doing to the comics. So anyway, the same situation repeated itself again, and I came back a half an hour later, and the nose was all stuffed up, and so 2 inches of rum, the Angostura bitters, the salt, and the limes. Down the hatch again, which you imagine after 3 of these, yours truly wasn't feeling all that well. And I managed to duck and weave my way up through the stairways, and the last thing I can remember was seeing my bed, and that was it, zonk. Over I went, and I reckon the next morning I woke up and I was still about 0.14. And so my confession to you, Ian, is that when I took the field that day, I was very fortunate. I took a few wickets, but I don't think I was in best of health. So sorry, pal, I know a few of us like Terry Jenner and Bob Massey didn't get away with it, but I think I got away with this one, mate. So, in closing, Ross Edwards used to dream up songs, and we would, we would always have a verse about each other, and it really was a marvellous. And all the little idiosyncrasies about each other were brought out in that particular song. And I think it was the old Harry Belafonte song. Is that right, Roscoe? What I'm talking about? Yeah, he's nodding over there. And in my particular aspect of it, it's only a pity that we couldn't have reproduced it to you people here tonight, because you would have had one hell of a laugh. But my idiosyncrasies were the fact, or twofold. One was that I used to visit a lot of computing stores or electronic stores, and be always looking for bargains and that sort of thing in the electronics world and take home. And the second thing was that right since I was a child, I always had problems with my feet in terms of things like dermatitis, which were very prevalent amongst fast bowlers. Anyway, the song went something like this, and please bear with me, it's the first time I've ever sung, but down at the duty-free bomber, buy all the stereo that lay before his eye. He's not afraid about the batsmen he meet, just about the leprosy on his feet. Well, I'm sad to say we're here to play the game of cricket in our own way. Oh, we may hit and we may miss, but no one can say we're canopolis.
This man holds a special place in the hearts of cricket lovers, not only because of his cricketing ability, but also for the quality of his character. Ladies and gentlemen, would you welcome with me tonight Mr. Ian Redpath. Ian, 1973 is a long time ago. It's almost 20 years ago. Is there something that particularly stands out in your mind about that tour to the West Indies?
Oh, I think really it was from my point of view, it was a terrific tour, great memories. Just to put the record straight, things were fairly tough. Our so-called gun of a fast bowler arrived in Sabina Park in the West Indies, and it was pretty hot over there, and he decided to spend the rest of the tour on the beach. And he came back with the best suntan of a lot of us, while we came back nervous wrecks. And that really left us with an attack a pace attack really, that consisted of Dougie Walters, myself, Greg Chappell, and occasionally Bomber Hammond and Max Walker would chime in. And the selectors had picked a spin attack with a lot of variety. I think we had 5-leg spinners in it. Ian Chappell, you could call him a leg spinner. Kerry O'Keefe, who bowled like a leg spinner but didn't turn him from the leg. Keith Stackpole, Terry Jenner and Johnny Watkins. And occasionally we had a backup there at practice. John Benno, when he wasn't thinking lustful thoughts about his wife back home in Australia, would come in and bowl a few overs at the nets. And Ross Edwards, when he wasn't composing his lyrics to his calypsos, would also bowl probably 1 over per session, practice session. So we started off the tour. It was obviously going to be tough, but Fagan summed it up pretty well. You'll see as they come up here during the evening, they were, well, a team of desperates. And there's only one thing I think they thought was better than having a good time, and that was winning. And I was lucky that I played with these guys in an era where, when we look back, we did win most of the close test matches we played in. And it was a terrific tour. We won a very, very important game there at Trinidad, and it was probably a lasting memory I'll have of my cricketing career, to look over at the pavilion. We got out of jail literally, and we knocked them over. And Keith Stackpole, who was, he made a mistake early on in the tour. Kerry O'Keefe, who thought he was a bit of an athletic sort of a customer, he challenged Keith Stackpole to a sprint, and people that know Keith Stackpole, he wasn't really built for speed. So the old Scully thought he'd back himself in here, and of course I was the official starter, and of course Keith Stackpole beat Scull over 50 metres by about 35 metres. So anyway, he never forgot this, Scull. So we're playing at Trinidad. He moved Keith Stackpole in about 2 yards in closer to the bat at short leg, and then proceeded to deliberately bowl a full toss on his leg stump to Kalicharan, who swept it straight into Stacky's face, and off he went. I was leading him off the ground. The West Indians were cheering madly. Stack was half concussed, wanted to fight the 35,000 that were on the ground. Anyway, I got him off before I got involved in the fight too. But anyway, we managed to get up and win the game, and we looked over the pavilion, and the guys that weren't playing in the test match, Stack, and they spontaneously ran out on the ground and congratulated us all, and it was never, something you never see. But over there was such an exciting game. We got out of jail and they ran out on the ground, and it was great, and we won the next game. And I had a couple of I did really a great service to West Indian cricket. Actually, not many people realise it, but one of the lyrics of Ross Edwards' calypso was it was a magnificent calypso, and each player had a little verse written about him, and mine was Redders stumps ain't holding so good, and that came because I played in 3 games, representative games before the test match, and Michael Holding, who was a young buck, dislodged my castle 3 times in a row. The old middle peg went back out of the ground, and You know, the guys reckon that, you know, he'd done me beautifully, but I thought, well, you know, normally I used to carve up the fast bowling. I thought, this bloke's a nice kid, he's got a bit of potential. If I hook, cut and drive into all parts of the ground like I normally do, like I did today actually, the bloke's career will be finished. So I sort of left a couple of gaps there and got him through, and he came out here, and I could never square the ledger, but I think I did a good service to the West Indian cricket. But on that note, I think I'll finish. You're starting to snooze in the back there. I thought I heard the bloke starting to snore, but it was a great tour, and you're good guys, and today has been a fantastic event for us. I've really enjoyed it. It's been for a good cause. I know all the blokes couldn't wait to get here. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Bill is very well known as one of the best managers of Australian cricket teams, and would you join me in please welcoming Mr. Bill Jacobs. Can I just ask you one question? We go back to 1973, you were the manager of that team, you had your problems during that tour, but how does that tour stand out in your mind? Does it stand out as a memorable one for you, and if so, why?
Well, I didn't have any problems, that's for sure. It was memorable because of the performance of the team, the way they performed on many occasions under adverse conditions. And it must be remembered that we never had the services of Dennis Lillee after the first test, which was a problem, of course. Bob Massey was ill at the start of the tour, and unfortunately John Watkins couldn't produce what we would have liked him to produce. But the team performed brilliantly, and you heard them at their team dinner last night, how brilliantly they fielded, or somebody referred to it last night, how brilliantly they fielded just after lunch on the last day of the third test, which they won, with runs and a bit of time to spare. And I remember it for that. That is one of the particular reasons, but they just had so much guts under a captain who had guts to offer, and he did it brilliantly, and he responded very well to Ian's captaincy. So that's why I remember the tour. One of the other reasons I remember the tour, a manager on tour has the services of a liaison officer to help him. And as I recall, the liaison officer I met at the start of the tour was Ron Lee from British West Indian Airlines. And he was fairly efficient. In Jamaica, Captain Abe Bailey, who was a magnificent person, assisted me. And then early in the tour, after playing Jamaica, we went up to Montego Bay to meet the President's 11. And there I met the Mayor of Montego Bay, a fellow named Trevor Cook. And on introduction to him, he said to me, I must introduce you to your liaison officer. I said, I've got a liaison officer. He said, no, you've got another one. He said, this liaison officer will show the team around the better sites of Montego Bay. I said, where is he? He said, not he, it's she. And he sang out to a lady called Cecile. He said, Cecile, come over here. So I was introduced to Cecile, and I said, how do you do? It's nice to meet you. She said, get rooted. I said, I beg your pardon. She said, get rooted. I said, I'm not too sure what you're saying. She said, get rooted. I said, well, I'll see you later. She said, get rooted, and walked away. I later found out that Greg Chappell and Doug Walters had told her that in Australia, get rooted could mean good morning, good afternoon, good evening, it's lovely to meet you. So we had several lovely days walking around telling each other to get rooted, and eventually we were entertained at an open-air cocktail party, and I espied Alan McGilvray there looking resplendent in a safari jacket, a cream silk cravat. And I said to Cecile, look, I want you to come and meet one of the most famous of Australians, Mr. Alan McGilvray. She said, get rooted. I said, yeah, precisely. So I took her over to Mac, and I said, Alan, I'd like you to meet my liaison officer, Cecile. I said, Cecile, this is Mr. Alan McGilvray, doyen of Australian broadcasters. Mac said, good evening, my dear, I'm delighted to meet you. She said, get rooted, and Mac dropped his glass. Dropped his glass on the ground, and I said, thank you, Cecile. Mac said, I've never been so insulted in all my bloody life. She said, get rooted. I said, thank you, Cecile. She said, get rooted, so it was a great tour.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome in true Australian fashion tonight a great Australian in his 83rd year, Mr. Alan McGilvray.
Thank you very much.
Come in closer. Now, Alan, the idea is you've got to get a little bit closer to the microphone, okay?
I've never done much of this before. What am I doing?
Last night I said to Mac, Mac, would you be willing to come to the front tomorrow night and say a few words to people? And he said, no. He said, why on earth would anybody want to hear from me? Do you want to hear from him? Can I ask you just two questions tonight? The first is this. When you were commentating, what was it that you thought about as you commentated on the game in front of you?
Easy question, mostly my wife. Now, I've had stories about wives tonight, which brings me back to the fact that I got a letter in England one day suing me as a co-respondent in her divorce case against her husband. Now, this is interesting, so I think I don't take it as solicitor yet. I rang her up and said, no, I just want to tell you that you are destroying my love life with my husband because you're on the air. He pays no attention to my sexual desires. Now, that's a nice thing. So I went on with this and we became very good friends. We kept writing letters to each other. I pretty near married her. But I'm of Scottish descent and I never had a sense of humour when I was growing up. But when I would knock around with fellas like Walters and Tabor and Chappell and this lot, they've destroyed me. They really have. I mean, I got a bit of a reputation of having a bottle of scotch in my room, which I needed in the West Indies when you're barred from grounds and you have bricks thrown at you and you need a little bit of respite. You have a little touch of scotch. So it became a bit persistent with all these characters coming out to my room. So I thought I'll make a little message for them. So I said, if you come up to my room, have a drink, I throw the cork out of the window and drink it. That stopped them.
Yeah, I reckon.
They went on, I was paying for it, and they could just have the drink and go. Well, I said, if you walk into my room, you drink that bottle of scotch. I even stopped Dougie. That's good.
Yes. Forget the first question because we've sort of sidetracked a little bit on that. But let me ask you a second question to do with the 1973 team. It is a few years ago. Was it a good cricket team? Yes or no?
Yes, definitely.
Why was it a good cricket team?
Because they were unified. They all worked together with their skipper. It's the team I travelled with, teams from Bradman onward. I never saw a team that had more unity, more discipline, more desire. They were real Australians, those fellas, and when they played that match at Trinidad, I think they had to get, Kalisharan was 90-something, and Maxie got him first ball after lunch, and I think, well, they had to get 70-something, and Australia won by 44. I've never seen a better display of fielding. Why do you do that? You see, you've got to look at the reasons when you're talking to people and explaining what's happening, because it's abstract to them, but Chappell's leadership was something I admired. He seemed to be able to get something out of people that other could not. Lots of things I didn't agree with him on, and we've had lots of arguments about that. Not arguments, but discussions. He was a very stubborn fella, but Chappell knew where he was going. I have a great regard for Ian. Maybe it's down the line from his grandfather, Victor York. He was a very great friend of mine, and if ever I learnt anything about broadcasting, he was the start of it. And Victor York, and there's a lot of Victor York in Ian Chappell. It is to me a great privilege here today to mix with this a lot, the 73, but they were really good fellows together. They worked with Ian. Ian had a hell of a job, but he did it and did it well.
We can't give you that bottle of scotch. Maybe Dougie will give it to you afterwards, I don't know. But what we would like to give to you tonight is this magnificent magnum of Grant Burge wine, donated by Grant Burge, and we'd like to present it to you, and we hope that even if you drink a little bit of it with Doug, you enjoy it, and remember a happy day in Adelaide.
I will. I'll remember that, but I tell you what, I won't be going to Dougie's room tonight to drink that.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Alan. Ladies and gentlemen, what more can be said about our next guest that hasn't already been said or hasn't already been written? The Englishman said he couldn't play cricket in their country. Some of the critics said that his technique had flaws, and other people said he wouldn't live long because he smoked too much. But at the same time, nobody had a softer spot in the hearts of Australian cricket followers than this man who has played some of the most magnificent innings around the world for his country. From a century in his first test, and more than a century, it was a century and a half, 155, he amassed 5,357 runs in test cricket at an average of just under 50. Ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, he epitomises what Australian cricket best stands for. Would you please welcome one of Australia's finest batsmen, who else but Dougie Walters.
Roger.
How are you, Doug?
I'm very well indeed, thank you.
Is it true you still smoke too much?
Yes, it's very interesting to be in this room tonight, isn't it?
It is indeed. How are you getting?
Very interesting being down at Glenelg Golf Club yesterday as well. Ian Chappell introduced me to Dr. John as being the club captain, and I then realised why the no smoking signs were everywhere. And I'm getting along fine tonight, and I saw John Self earlier tonight, and I clarified the situation, so if anyone has seen me having the odd puff or two down there, I can assure you all is above board in here tonight.
Somebody suggested that maybe if you started thinking about your wife a bit more often when you're away, you could give up smoking, Doug. Do you reckon there's any chance of that?
Well, I cop plenty of flack at home, I can assure you, from my wife about smoking, so that's one of the reasons I like getting away every now and again. The first test in Sabina Park in Jamaica in 1973, I was glad to hear that Greg just happened to mention that Ian was a little cross at lunchtime on day 2. Well, he wasn't real impressed on the morning of day 3. I was working for Rothmans at the time, and they just happened to have their ball in Jamaica on the second night of that test match. And of course, being a pretty true person, I had to go along to represent the company, and I got home rather late, something like 9:30, 10:15. And I was rooming with Terry Jenner. Now, I knew the next morning Terry Jenner was going downtown to buy some cassettes or records or something. So I thought, now, you've got to give yourself a couple of chances of waking up in time to get to the ground by 11 o'clock the next morning. I set the little digital clock on the side of the radio. I rang an early morning call for 9:30, and I ordered breakfast for 9 o'clock, I think. The whole 3 failed. I get a phone call from the ground by Terry Jenner 5 minutes before the game was starting. Now, we're about 5 or 6 miles away from the ground. I picked up the phone, abused the lady about not giving me the early morning call, abused her about not sending the breakfast along, jumped into my clothes, raced out the door. I said, order me a taxi. She said, Mr. Walters, he said, there's taxis waiting at the door. I fell over the breakfast tray as I was running across the door. Jumped in the cab and he said, Doug, he said, you're very late. I said, get me there in a hurry. And it was the greatest bit of driving I think I've ever come across. I mean, you might have seen some good driving over here last weekend, but this was absolutely fantastic. This fellow mounted the footpath. And once, you've got to appreciate outside the test grounds in the West Indies in particular, the traffic is rather chaotic, which it was at 11 o'clock as we're heading towards that ground. He mounted the footpath and spent more time on the footpath than he did on the road. Got me into the ground. In fact, I was there at the ground and I've missed the first 3 overs. I'm changed, down to the fence, Johnny Benno's out there fielding for me. There I am waving at the fence, fellas, I'm here. The whole lot of them ignore me. The end of the next over, fellas, here I am. They ignore me again. So I think if they do it again after the next over, I'm just going to go charging on. Which they done, and I went charging on. So John Benno had to go off. I was greeted by that very polite captain. And I must thank him because he started me on my fitness program that particular day. Fine leg, you. Into the next over, third man, you. Fine leg, you. Third man, fine leg. For the rest of the session. We've gone off at lunchtime, going through the gate. And of course I'm coming from fine leg again, aren't I? Right down the other end of the ground. The other boys are in having their lemon squash or halfway through their lunch, I think. Apart from the captain, who happened to be waiting at the gate to greet me. Won't so-and-so happen again, will it? I said, I can't guarantee that. I said, I just hope it doesn't. That was one of the reasons I stayed up all night last night, so I could get to the ground on time today. I must say it was good to get back at Ian Chappell yesterday on the golf course. Terry Jenner and I played Ian Chappell and Ian Redpath. And I should say that I took their money because TJ's not allowed to bet. I got a little bit of advice for both of those Ians. Reminds me of a story about this golfer. He was having awful problems with his golf, hooking, slicing, shanking, the whole works. He'd been to the pro every day for a fortnight. And the pro had just about given up on this guy. He walked back in the following Friday for another lesson. The pro saw him coming and said, oh, not this bloke again, he's hopeless. This bloke can't help him anymore, he's hopeless. He walked up to the pro, he said, pro, he's on another lesson. He said, look, he said, I've been watching you. He said, every lesson I've given you the last 2 weeks, he said, you're getting worse. He said, you're hooking them more, slicing them more, shanking the whole works. He said, look, he said, you're wasting your money and my time. He said, the best advice I can give you is to go and play at 10 holes without using the ball. He said, golf is a confidence game. He said, now I want you to go through the whole exercise. He said, I want you to put the tee in the ground, get the driver out of the bag on the tee. Just imagine you've hit it straight down the middle. Get the irons out of the bag, punch it onto the green, putters out of the bag in the hole. 18 holes, he said, will fix you, help your confidence. This bloke was going so bad he thought he'd give this a try. Monday afternoon, 4 o'clock, he walks on the tee. He thinks there won't be too many around Monday afternoon. Bit of a look around, puts his tee in the ground. It's a driver out of the bag. He's halfway through his backswing. A bloke walks out of the bushes behind. He said, hey. He said, excuse me. He said, hey. He said, but you haven't got a ball on that tee. He said, look, he said, it's a long story. He said, I've been to the pro the last 2 weeks. He said, he told me to play 18 holes without using the ball. He said, help me confidence. The bloke looked at him. He said, there's a funny thing about that. He said, he told me to do the same thing. A bloke looked up at him. He said, well, you want to play a 2-ball? He said, yeah. He said, I'll have a game with you. The other bloke said, before you head off, he said, when I play golf, he said, we normally play for a little bit of a side bet. He said, you interested in a side wager? The other bloke said, yeah. He said, I don't normally play for a couple of dollars. The bloke said, how about we make it 5-5-10 in a match? Good idea, he said. The other bloke said, well, you got your tee in the ground. He said, you might as well lead off first, go on, away you go. Gets the driver back, goes bang. The other bloke stands behind him. He said, gee, you struck that good. He said, have a go at that. He said, as straight as a dart. He said, it's over the fairway bunker, about 240, straight down the middle. Good shot. The other bloke puts his tee in the ground, gets the driver out of the bag, goes bang. The other bloke stands behind him. He said, you struck that good too. He said, that's over the fairway bunker. He said, just a little left of mine. He said, but it's opened up the green. He said, great shape, beautiful, he said. They get their irons out of the bag and they punch it onto the green. Putters come out of the bag, 2 putts into the whole par. They go 17 holes and they've parred every hole. There's a bit of money riding on the 18th. Par 3 over the creek, 140 metres. Other bloke said to the first bloke, he said, you just took it the honour. He said, go on, away you go. Puts a tee in the ground, gets a 7-9 out of the bag, goes bang. The other bloke stands behind him and said, gee, you struck that good. He said, have a go at this. He said, it's going straight for the flag. What a good shot. Look at this, look at this. Oh, he said, bad luck. He said, the wind's just got it at the end. He said, just dragged it across on the edge of the green. He said, but good shot. He said, pin high, good shot. Other bloke puts his tee in the ground, gets a 7-iron out of the bag, goes bang. The other bloke stands behind him. He said, gee, you struck that good too. He said, that's going straight for the flag. What a good shot. Look at this, look at this. He said, oh, bad luck. He said, the wind's got yours too. He said, just dragged it across on the edge of the green. In fact, he said, they're side by side, the two balls, right together on the edge of the green. Good shot. First bloke gets a putter out of the bag, goes bang. The other bloke stands behind him. He said, gee, you struck that sweet. He said, have a go at this. He said, it's coming down the slope, coming down the slope, coming down, coming down, coming down. He said, it's in the hole. He said, you got a birdie. Good shot, you got a birdie. The other bloke walked over it, grabbed his putter, looked down. He said, oh, jeez. He said, what bad luck. He said, you've hit my ball. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the invitation to be with you, and good luck to the City Mission. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you welcome here tonight to the pavilions the J.B. Weir Australian Cricket Legends Night, Mr. Ross Edwards. Ross, it is beautiful to see you back in Adelaide again today. Well, Ross, you've got the podium here for a couple of minutes. Is there a favourite story you'd like to tell us?
Only that I would have to say that speaking early in the evening is a great pleasure. Following Ian Redpath is very difficult to get to form an attention getter quite the same way as he did, but he spoke very much like he batted. Very steady, very paced, and managed to destroy a lot of the stories that some of the other players will be speaking during the rest of the evening. Being classed as an opening batsman, it's only fair that I should make a comment about Sabina Park, where we played our first test match. Sabina Park is a fairly small ground. It was very dusty, and it was very warm and humid when we were playing there. And I think on the second day, I think it was, lunch had occurred and I'd had something to eat, and I wasn't, I think we were batting and I was already out, and I was having a quiet little lie down when the public address system, which is somewhat different from those that you find in English grounds and Australian grounds, which are governed by a matter of decorum, and the certain things that are put out over the public address system tend not to be the sort of things that you'd speak around in your lounge room or that you would discuss with your friends, and they are basically things that you would want to advise all of the members of the public. This wasn't quite the case at Sabina Park, where on this particular day, as I was quietly dozing off, the public address announcer cleared his throat, and I wish I could copy the West Indian accent, but I can't, so I won't try, said, "Attention, attention, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, we wish to advise you that your house is burned down." At which case the whole 18,000 people burst out laughing, and there was an uproarious laughter from the ground. I nearly fell off the seat because I kept thinking, what was Mr. Brown to do? I wondered whether it was an advice that he should leave the ground immediately and tear home to the ruins of his house, or whether he should stay there and enjoy the cricket. And I thought that was very curious because of the way that they did the announcements, and they made a number of these rather curious comments to various members of the public. And it just so happened that the following day, about the same time, lunch would take place, I was probably out again, and I was just having a quiet little snooze, and the public address announcer came on the air and he cleared his throat and he said, Mr. Jones, we have a message for you, Mr. Jones. Your wife wants us to let you know that her brother has died and she's gone home in the bus." And this was a genuine public address announcement, at which another 18,000 people just fell about laughing, including most of the members of the Australian team. And I think that really put a stamp on the way that we approached the tour. It was quite different from most of the other tours that a lot of the players have been on. Certainly it was different from any other tour that I had been on. I'd have to say that we were fortunate that all the players that took part in the tour all came good at the times that they were needed. And for that reason it was very successful. We had good combinations of batting, bowling and fielding at the times they mattered. And I would have to say to the organisers, to the Adelaide City Mission, to the sponsors in particular, on behalf of the team, I certainly have enjoyed myself enormously. All the rest of the team have, and thank you very much.
What a fantastic feast of cricketing stories and characters that you are hearing and seeing tonight. Each of these men do a great deal of public speaking. They stand in their own right as solo performers on any one night, and we're offering to you the whole lot of them tonight as part of this one program. Our next guest, ladies and gentlemen, played 8 seasons of first-class cricket. He compiled 2,888 runs, and they were superbly made runs, and many of you have seen him here today. He batted magnificently. Would you please welcome tonight to the pavilions, to Adelaide, and to the J.B. Weir Australian Cricket Legends Night, Mr. John Benno. As we've said, certainly to the other guests tonight, John, welcome to Adelaide. And how many of you can just put up your hand if you saw the match today? Just put your hand up if you saw part of the match. Okay, that's a good number of people here tonight, and I'm sure you'll... yeah, it's about 15 actually, John, don't underestimate it. But the whole 15 of you, no, there were a lot more. I'm sure that all of you would agree that John has lost little of his batting skills. You batted superbly. Did you feel as though you did?
Oh, no, not really. I had my wife on my mind, actually. I was still lusting.
Right. Yeah. Is this is sort of an ongoing problem that you've got, John, is it?
Oh, I wouldn't say it's a problem. It's very enjoyable. I mean, you take a fellow like Ian Redpath, who lies there awake in bed at night and dreams about hitting the ball in the middle, and I dream about my wife.
We actually have a counselling service for people like you, but... Was it a good cricket team?
I'm sort of with the rest of the blokes that was a terrific team. It had a lot of spirit, and we did it pretty tough because a couple of the blokes got injured. And I think it just had a really good feel about it from the very word go. And I think it was a great tour, really. And I'm glad I'm here today.
You actually ended up on the top of the bowling averages, and we didn't quite realise that you were such a good bowler.
Well, I think actually this is probably an appropriate moment when I should clarify something that Ian Redpath said at the beginning of the evening, when he said that Dennis Lee was a gun bowler, and many of you may have felt that he said something else. I went away on that trip as a batsman, and I came back as a bowler. And that says a lot for Ian Chappell as a captain, I think.
Right, John, I am sure that people here tonight would be disappointed if I didn't raise the topic which probably a couple of other interviewers have over the years, but you did run into a bit of strife over the old ripple-soled boots, didn't you, mate? Would you like to just put your side of the story to give us a chance to...
I think it... Sorry? Bare my soul. Well, I think it shows you what a mug I was, because if the same thing had happened in 1992, I'd be a millionaire today, because those boots would be worth a lot of money. But as it was, I don't even have them anymore, and I think really it was a bit of a fun thing, wasn't it? We should all have a bit of a laugh at it.
Yeah, the Australian hierarchy thought it was a bit of a fun thing too, from what I remember, John.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Why be a cricket selector? Are you paid well, or...?
No. Well, you know you're not paid. No, they don't give you anything at all. They just give you a raspberry every now and again because you don't pick so-and-so. You don't pick South Australians in the Test team anymore.
I was coming to that.
But no, it's just an ongoing opportunity for me to go away on cricket tours and dream about my wife. You'd probably be all interested to know that about 18 months ago I had the pleasure of spending a weekend here with Rodney Marsh and Brian Tabor and Jim Higgs and myself, and we picked the under-19 team to England, and we left Matthew Hayden out. So it just goes to show you. We must be fairly ordinary judges.
Yeah. Well, just one further in-depth question.
Or then again, down the line we might be good judges. Who's to say?
Who's to say, after all? You never know, do you?
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Mr. John Benno for being with us tonight. He possesses one of the best-known faces in Australia. It's raced into the wicket. This face has raced into the wicket with 100,000 people chanting its name, and it's been the producer of some of the most ferocious appeals ever to confront a hapless umpire. But that face also smiled on 355 different occasions, only conceding on average 24 runs between each of those smiles. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome that face back to Adelaide, Mr. D.K. Lilly.
Yeah, just stay close. I'll stay close here. Yeah. So worry. Listen, come on, get on with it.
Yeah, isn't it? You don't feel embarrassed, do you? No.
It's your cue.
Dennis, perhaps people don't understand just how difficult it was. After that tour, obviously your back was very bad, and we thought we'd seen the last of this new young Lilly. Can you describe for us how difficult it was, or what you went through in trying to recuperate after that tour?
Well, I mean, you know, at that age, you'd do anything to get back in the game, so you just put the hard work in. I mean, it's one of those things where you have a problem, you either disregard the problem or you address the problem. I addressed the problem as much as I could, and fortunately it all worked out. But there's no magic cure, it was just hard work.
Today you came back for a couple of spells, and I noticed you once again going through a whole series of stretching exercises before you bowl. Is this, it's not just what Merv Hughes does down in front of Bay 13, it is you genuinely trying to flex the muscles, is that right?
If I didn't do that, I think the elastic band would break. It does get a bit harder as you get older, I can tell you. Well, I mean, you know, it's harder to get warmed up anyway. So.
Perhaps you, John Benno, and I ought to have a chat afterwards and see how we go. You're still working up a lot of pace.
Yeah, Brocky came in and showed me his thigh, and he said, last year it was my finger you broke. This year, have a look at this, and it was a huge welt on his thigh. I said, yeah, Brocky, next year it'll be your shoelace. I'm slowing down all the time.
Dennis, this is the second year that you've come across and played in this Legends game, and I think that we would like to express to you our great appreciation. Why did you, you can be honest here, why have you come back and played in these games?
Well, there's only one real reason, and I might get a little bit sentimental here, but if it was asked by anyone else, and including the City Mission, I'm sorry, Roger, but anyone else but TJ, I'll tell you I wouldn't be here. Because it does hurt the body. You people maybe find it a bit hard to understand, but, you know, when you get to our age, it is very difficult to get out there and run around and try and send a ball down and run a few singles and throw the ball in from the boundary. When everything in the body's been worked pretty hard over the years. TJ is probably the reason most of us have made the mission here. We obviously believe very much in what you're doing is very good, otherwise we also wouldn't be here, but certainly TJ. But I think it goes back to a long way to Australian teams and what they are and what you feel when you're part of them. People talk about a lot of great Australian teams, and there have been some fantastic ones over the years, but I was talking to a few of the lads last night, mumbling to a few of the lads this morning, sorry, over croissants. As we applied the sunburn cream coming home from Jules, so we wouldn't get sunburn. And we said that one of the great things about this team was that it was a team of absolute goers. They didn't get a lot of acclaim as, say, the 48 side or, say, the sides of the 70s and 80s, or the late 70s and 80s, but I believe this side was one that, as people have said before, did it hard. And I think at the moment, and I hate to sort of really get right into what's happening at the moment, but Australia's doing it hard at the moment. And if I think about that side and the way they did it hard after there were a few problems on the tour, maybe we could take a leaf out of that book. And I think that's what makes me feel very special towards the 73 side that toured the West Indies. If you put it in its perspective, we beat the West Indies 2-0. No one else has beaten them hasn't beaten them since then. It's a fair achievement. They're a bloody good side and bloody good lads.
Dennis, as I said before, you are certainly one of the best known Australians, and my colleague Paul Madden said to me after he came back from the opening of our Smithfield Mission Employment Centre yesterday, he said, I had no idea just how much these people are public property, because Dennis, having made the opening, was trying for about 20 minutes to get across to get a drink. He was unable to do so because people wanted him to stand there, take photographs of him, ask him questions and sign autographs. And Dennis, quite genuinely, I know why you've come back. You've come back for your old mate, and you've come back to applaud the efforts that TJ has made in his life to really make good of himself. But we want to say, all of us here as Adelaideans, and certainly as far as the Adelaide City Mission is concerned, we are proud of you. You are a great Australian, and we thank you very much indeed. Okay. Just stay for a second. Ladies and gentlemen, the thought that our next guest, who's already become a South Australian, might horrify him, but there's not a state in Australia that would not happily accept him as an honourable member of their ranks. If Dougie Walters epitomises what Australian batting is all about, then this man certainly portrays perfectly the great Aussie wicketkeeper. Australia's tradition of great wicketkeepers was certainly continued in the achievements of this man, who in 97 Test matches for Australia took 343 catches and made 12 stumpings, 355 dismissals, the same as his colleague D.K. Lilly. But not only was he a magnificent wicketkeeper, in those Test matches he also made 3,633 runs and therefore lays genuine claim to being an all-rounder. Do you want to listen to this man speak tonight? Yeah! Don't mind if we do. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rodney Marsh.
I just found it on the way.
Oh, is that right? How are you?
Good, mate.
Good. Do you mind being called a South Australian?
Yes. I don't mind being called anything. No, I don't mind. I'm living here, yeah.
All right, you're happy to be living here?
Yes, I am. Indeed.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy playing cricket in charity matches?
No. I'm too old.
What have you got organised tonight?
Well, hey, don't. I am living here. I go home early. I got home by 3:30 last night.
Rod, is this a symbolic act of yours to hand your pads over to us to auction tonight, or are you just a very generous man?
No, well, Kepler Wessels threw his boots in his last game, didn't he, when he captained Queensland to yet another Sheffield Shield losing final. And he came back, so, you know, I can get pads whenever I want them. Mind you, that's what you got gloves for. You don't need pads, do you?
Yeah, true. Rod, we know you are now living in South Australia, but we are obviously delighted that you're part of our celebrations over these couple of days, a very integral part of it. You got a story you want to tell us?
Got a couple.
Actually, do you want to hear a couple or just one?
No, be very, very brief.
Very brief, okay.
Very brief.
You're away there.
Yeah. Doug Walters. I mean, you can't be brief when you're talking about Doug because nothing happens quickly. It takes a hell of a long time. But I've got to tell you, New Zealand, a lot of you may have heard it, but it is a true story. Before the Test match in 1977, just before the centenary Test, and I'll try and make it as quick as possible, we have a team meeting, right? And you have a team meeting, you sit around, you plan dismissals before it happens, and it always, if you're playing well, it happens. If you're not playing well, it doesn't happen. You have a couple of beers, no wine on the table. Sorry, Grant Burge, but no wine on the table. A couple of squashes, those that want to do it, and then afterwards you go to the bar, right? And you've got to be seen in the bar if you're an Australian cricketer, because that's the way we are. Now, at the Avon Motor Lodge in Christchurch in 1977, I happened to be vice captain of the team. I'd started a book on the aeroplane, right? And because I was vice captain, I had a single room, which is fantastic. So, me being the shrewd bloke, thinking, well, I don't know whether we're batting or fielding. I mean, normally if you're batting first or batting against New Zealand, you know that, as batting at number 7, that, you're not going to do much that day at all, because our blokes are going to smash them, aren't they? Particularly in those days, and it should be forever. And yes, I was part of the first losing Australian test team to New Zealand. That was good. That was fantastic. I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. Anyway, I'm trying to cut this story short. What am I doing? So, we all go to the bar, and at about 10 o'clock, I'm thinking I'll just go to the toilet and keep going, which was our want in those days, so to speak. I've ducked into my room. We had a manager called Roger Watton, his first time on tour. MLA from Burrinjong or Gunnedah or somewhere in New South Wales. Hell of a good bloke, Roger. And loved cricket. Anyway, 5 o'clock the next morning, after I've read probably 20 pages in the book and asleep by 10:30, I get the Bacchus. I thought, Christ, what's going on here? I mean, I shouldn't have probably said that at the City Mission. My goodness, what's going on here? I figure if Bill Jacobs can say whatever he said and Ian Redpath said what all you thought he said, then I can say that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I sort of said, who's that? He said, it's Roger. I said, Roger who? Oh, yeah, right. It's a manager. Well, obviously one of the kids had been run over. I mean, because no manager knocks on my door at 5 o'clock in the morning. I mean, that's ridiculous. On any player's door, you just don't do it. So I've rushed the door. I said, Roger, what's wrong? He said, he's still there. I said, who's still there? He said, Dougie's still in the bar. I said, well, he is 21. I mean, he votes. I mean, he can do what he likes, can't he? He said, you go and get him. He said, it's ridiculous. It's crazy. He's got to play a test match tomorrow. I said, mate, look, just go back to bed. He said, I can't. I've just go back to bed. I'm going back to bed. So I've slammed the door in his face and gone back to bed. Now, we leave for the test match at 9 o'clock in the morning. So there's a team coach there. I walk out with Roger and he's just shaking his head. Is he up or what? We get onto the team bus. Now, Dougie always sat down the back, but there he was, sitting right at the front of the team bus, lighting probably his second Rothmans Blue for the day. He said, morning Bacchus, good morning manager. And I said, morning Freddie. And the manager just shook his head. And we went and sat down the back of the bus, and all the way to the ground he shook his head. We lost our 4th wicket at 97. And the first ball that our Doug Walters faced was a bouncer from a young, very fast Richard Hadley. Not very good in those days, but very fast. Now, you all know what you've got to do with a bouncer. You either bloody hook it, or you step inside it, you cut it, or you duck it, or you weave it, or, in fact, you can play it with a straight bat in front of your nostril, but not our Doug. He thought about all those things, I'm sure, because he's a very talented player. And he eventually got the bat horizontal in front of his face, and the ball hit the middle of the bat, and it rebounded back towards a diving Hadley who couldn't quite get his hands underneath it. At stumps, he was 120 not out. Now, when a bloke gets 100 for his country, you've got to have a beer with him, don't you? So he left the dressing sheds at about, and that's exactly what they were, sheds, because we were in New Zealand, the rugby grounds. We left the sheds at about 9 o'clock, and I still hadn't finished that book, but I had to go to the bar and have one with Dougie because he did get 100. And I reckon I read another 20 pages knowing I had to keep the next day. And otherwise I'd have been there with him. And at 5 o'clock the next morning. I said, yes, Roger. He said, he's still there. I said, well, he has got 100, hasn't he? He said, well, go and get him. He's not out overnight. I said, mate, he's still 21 and he's still got the power to vote. I'm not going to get him. Back to sleep I went. 9 o'clock the next morning, Dougie's at the front of the bus lighting yet another Rothmans Blue. And he went on to make 250. His highest ever test score. And people often say to me, how good a player would Doug Walters have been if he didn't drink or smoke? And I say, who gives a shit? It's been a terrific day. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, TJ. You owe us a lot, mate. When I say you owe us a lot, you've got a lot to answer for. And that answering will come at probably, I don't know what time I wake up, if I wake up. But when I wake up, TJ, I'll be bloody thinking of you.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Mr. Bob Massey. You probably have been asked this question before, and I hope it's not an embarrassing one, but the comments that I have made there regarding that magnificent feat at Lord's, is it something that perhaps a little bit because of maybe some of the disappointments after that time, has it haunted you a little bit, or how do you see that?
16 wickets at Lord's?
Yes, and perhaps not being able to continue on with the magnificence of that form.
Well, I think more the duck at Lord's haunted me more than the 16 wickets at Lord's, but...
Who made the duck?
Me.
Oh, yeah.
No, I think that you don't set out to take 16 wickets in a match. You know, you don't set out to kick 15, 17 goals in an AFL football match. It just happens, and so I think you set out to just do your job in a game, and if you've done your job and contributed to a victory, then you've done it, whether you take 16 or 8 or 11 or whatever. And so I look at that performance on that basis. Yeah, you know after that game that you'll never take 16 wickets again in a Test match. So I mean, it's just you know, you just don't understand that. This is one of those freaks that happens. And yeah, so I'm disappointed I didn't play more Test cricket. But then again, I'm pleased I played 6 Test matches when people like Ian Brayshaw and Ken Cunningham from South Australia played none.
Bob, I was standing side on when you were bowling today. Were you swinging the ball prodigiously or
yes.
bowling very badly?
No, I was bowling. It was just going. I couldn't control it. It was just going both ways so far. You know, it was just like Lord's. Really, it was just unbelievable. You know.
Bob, we do thank you for coming across for these couple of days and joining us, and we appreciate that very much. And would you like to tell us a story before you go?
Yeah, well, I will actually relate a story that when the West Indies tour, naturally when the plane takes off, you hope you have a bit bigger contribution than what I made to the West Indies tour as a player. But hopefully in the background I did contribute. It was very tough conditions, and the bowlers I can assure you, like Maxie Walker and Jeff Hammond, bowled under some very adverse conditions, and we tried to help them when they come off the ground by taking their boots off and toweling them down and get their lunch and just freshen them up again for the next 2 hours, because it really was tough work. A bit different to England, I can assure you. But this one particular story relates to Guyana, which is about the 4th Test match. And there was some times on that tour where things got a bit frustrated because we were locked into hotels. We couldn't really move around as freely as we could in other countries. And on this particular day, we found a rubber ball somewhere, decided to go into the pool and have some catching practice, and had the skim the ball off the surface, and then you dive and catch it, and when you dropped the catch, that was your score, and you were out. And so we had this competition. Halfway through this competition, the Pan Am crew staying in the same hotel decided to come down to the pool, and unfortunately positioned themselves at a very deep gully position, with a captain and his 2 or 3 stewardesses who are about 11.5 out of 10, and that's why I think a fair few catches went down for a while. But we started skimming the ball off the water, and inevitably a couple went into the drinks with the captain there with his new sunglasses on and reading the latest American magazine. And finally there was a complaint made to the hotel management, and we were told to stop playing this silly little game and let these people relax by the pool. So that was fine, except Dougie Walters grabbed about 4 of us and we went upstairs to his room where he had this very strange collection of crocodile skins and what have you to terrorise everybody with. Terry Jenner made a very bad mistake early on the tour and sort of said he was terrified by these things, and so he was terrified and terrorised for 3 months. I held my cool and didn't let on for 3 months, but I was terrified as well. Did get caught a couple of times. But Dougie took us up to his room and he got this crocodile skin out of this wardrobe, and the Pan Am crew decided to go for a swim, and they're going up and down, and the captain had just done his sort of Mark Spitz turn and was coming back up at the pool, and Dougie had dropped his skin out of the window on top of the pool, and the water was sort of going up and down like this, so the captain has just sort of done the tumble turn and come up again, and the crocodile's surfing towards him. The captain and the 2 stewardesses just disappeared. We never saw them again. But for me, it was a privilege to play with the guys that we've been with the last 24, 36 hours. To Terry Jenner, who is a great bloke. I think, TJ, it's great to see you back in the groove again of life. And thank you, mate, for everything you've done. And congratulations to you, too. Thanks, very much.
It is not just the fact that this man was a homegrown product. It was not just the fact that he played 88 tests for Australia. It was not the fact that he captained Australia on 48 occasions. It's not just the fact that he made 24,535 runs in a first-class career at an average of 52.2. It's not just the fact that he made a century in his first test, but it's the manner in which he played the game, the gracefulness of his batting style, which we've seen again today, albeit Mackie did loft a couple of the on-drives. Mainly it's the delight that this man has given to millions of cricket fans around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome home Greg Chappell. Now, Greg, welcome back to Adelaide. Is it good to come home? Is it home?
Well, Roger, I don't live in Adelaide anymore, so it's not home from that point of view, but I always get a very warm feeling when I come back to Adelaide because I've got very happy memories of growing up here and very happy memories, of course, of the Adelaide Oval. I can remember as a young schoolboy, primary school, coming here and watching my then heroes playing cricket out here, finishing school over at Kent Town and racing into town and up to the Adelaide Oval to watch afternoon sessions of the Shield games. So to get a chance to come back, albeit some of us are struggling these days to play the game properly, but to walk out on the Adelaide Oval again was a great thrill for me.
And you got a story to tell us?
Well, certainly. I mean, we're here talking about the 1973 tour of the West Indies, and it's one that, and I'm very fortunate to have played cricket in most of the major cricket playing countries, but I think the Caribbean is the place where I have the fondest memories. And that 1973 tour, I think probably some of the fondest memories that I have from my playing days. I had a great feeling for West Indian cricket from growing up and watching the West Indians play here in Australia, not least of all the 60-61 series. And it was with great excitement that I embarked on that tour to the West Indies to see if it was as exciting as Alan McGilvray and others had painted in word pictures as I listened on the radio over the years. And I can say that one thing that I was never disappointed. Any test ground that I walked onto on the other side of the world, I was never disappointed with what I saw because of the word pictures that Alan McGilvray had painted over the years. I felt as though I'd been there before and I knew exactly what to expect. And it was certainly exactly that case when we walked into the Sabina Park ground for the first time in 1973. That's where we landed in Jamaica. We played our first game there and then we played the first test match there. And one of the most abiding memories of my test career is of that first morning of the first test of that tour in 1973 at Sabina Park. It's a small ground. I think it had a capacity of around about 18,000 people. It's around about the size of the Gabba, a bit smaller than, certainly smaller than the Adelaide Oval and a bit smaller than most of the Australian cricket grounds. As I say, it had a capacity of about 18,000, but when we arrived at the ground around about 9:30, there would have been something like 25,000 people already inside that ground, and those that were inside were throwing their sleeves of their jackets over the fence so that their mates could climb up the outside and into the ground without tickets. There were 4 light pylons that they used for night soccer in the off-season, and they were jam-packed with people. And the atmosphere was unbelievable. Now, I'd played test matches in Australia and England up till that stage, but I'd never experienced anything like it. And they had a guy called Newton Dow, who was the great hope, the great fast bowling hope for the West Indies after the retirement of Griffiths and Hall, and he was picked in that test match, having been supposedly injured for the game the week before when we played Jamaica. So we hadn't seen him before, and the West Indians, as you probably realise, love fast bowling. They love batsmen who play shots. And when the 2 captains, Ian and Rowan Canai, went out to toss that morning, the excitement, the noise level around the ground was incredible, and it sort of just kept increasing the closer the start of the play became. And when the 2 captains walked out onto the ground, the noise got louder and the excitement got louder, and Ian won the toss and decided to bat on what was a very good batting wicket. When the announcement was made, the excitement grew a bit louder, and we in the dressing room started to get a bit nervous, as you do, knowing that you've got to go out and bat shortly. And most batsmen, if they're honest, will tell you that they don't like facing fast bowling. Keith Stackpole is probably one of the few exceptions to that rule. He loves and loved batting against fast bowling, and he was the only one that I know of in the team that day who was looking forward to batting against this Newton Dow. Terry Jenner's smiling in the background. I know he wasn't looking forward to it. But I can own up, TJ, nor was I. So Stacky was quite excited, and I was batting at 4, so I was taking my time getting my pads on and trying to sort of prepare myself mentally, and was sitting in the dressing room, and as this noise grew louder and louder, and as Newton Dow measured out his run to bowl the first ball of that game, this atmosphere and the noise reached crescendo, fever pitch. Newton Dow came in to bowl, and as he hit the delivery stride, for that split second that it took the ball to travel from his end to Stacky's end, there was absolute total silence. It only lasted for that fraction of a second, but it was the most eerie feeling I've ever experienced around a test match, and it's one that I'll never forget. It never happened anywhere else. And once that ball hit bat, and Stacky, I think, hit the first ball for 4, that noise reached a fever pitch again and just continued at that level throughout the day. And the love of cricket that the West Indians had and have, and their love and respect for Australian cricket, because they liked the way we played our cricket. They couldn't wait to see Dennis Lillee and Bob Massey after their exploits in England and against Pakistan and Australia. And everywhere we went, it was, which one's Lillee, which one's Massey? It was almost a whisper. Everywhere you went, you could hear this whispering noise, and as you got closer, you realised what they were saying. Unfortunately for both Dennis and Bob, they didn't take much part in that series, which was a real mixed blessing, because a couple of players got opportunities that probably wouldn't have got opportunities, and they grabbed them and made real names for themselves on that particular tour. But the other part of the mixed blessing was that off the field it created a few problems, and it is great credit to fellas like Fagan, our manager, Bill Jacobs, who has to look after these sort of extracurricular problems of looking after who rooms with whom, all of those sort of extra things that you don't think about when you're watching cricket. You don't realise what goes on behind the scenes, and Bill was one of the great managers that we had, and he overcame many of the problems that cropped up, and in fact most of us didn't even know half the problems that cropped up. He handled them so well. But finding the right roommates is sometimes very difficult and very crucial to the success of a tour. And in Jamaica we stayed at the Courtly Manor Hotel, and we had rooms that were separate from the motel part or the hotel part, and they were separate sort of cabins around the pool area, and they all had their own little verandas, and the local brewery, Red Stripe, made a donation of and it must have been about an 8 or 10 gallon keg that was sort of the team's for their use, relaxing back at the hotel. And it wasn't a very difficult decision to work out where that keg should go. It was decided that Terry Jenner and Doug Walters should room together to save buggering up 2 other rooms. And that as they were going to be up the longest anyway, the keg might as well go on their veranda, and that won't annoy anyone else who wanted to go to bed early. So that was the way it worked out, and it worked very well. But unfortunately, as we've discussed, Dennis Lilly was injured for most of that tour, and Tommy the tourist he became, and really enjoyed himself. Unfortunately, he was my roommate for the bulk of that tour, and it was very difficult because his sleeping patterns were very different from mine. I was coming in early and getting up early. He was coming in late and getting up late. And really, I didn't get to know him all that well at all because I hardly saw him. But it was difficult because, I mean, I was getting 2 or 3 hours sleep, then he'd come in and bang the door open and turn the lights on and want to explain to me what a good time he'd had. Then he'd probably go to sleep and I was wide awake. So we had a few things to sort out. But by the end of the tour, I think Dennis and I had the thing solved pretty well, and we got our program worked out very well. And just finally, the other problem that you don't come across very often, you don't think about very often, particularly in a country where they speak the same language, is that we sometimes do have a language problem. And I can remember at lunch on one of the days of the test match at Kingston, Sabina Park, we'd been fielding and things hadn't gone as well as Ian would have liked in that morning session. We went in for lunch. He was a little bit hot under the collar, not only because of the temperature, but just the way things were going. And he sort of stormed straight into the lunchroom, and in the lunch, nice salad was put in front of him, and he ate that down very quickly. And Ian was very keen ice cream eater in those days, and the old retainer who was serving the lunches, helping serve lunches that day, came along, and as he took his lunch away, he asked Ian, "Can I get you anything else, sir?" And Ian said, "Yes, ice cream, please." And I saw the guy sort of pull back a little bit, and he started to move back to ask Ian again, and realised that Ian wasn't very happy, so that I better go and get what he wants. So he came back with an ashtray and plonked it down in front of Ian, who promptly looked at it and couldn't quite work out what it was. And he turned to me and he said, "And sir, what would you like?" And I said, "I'll have an ashtray, thank you very much." And he brought me some ice cream. Thank you very much.
Not only was our next guest a very capable leg spinner and a more than useful batsman, but he remains one of the suavest characters to play Test cricket since the last war. His fair hair may have turned grey or some other colour, but his collar remains up and his figure is good. Hailed early in his career as a possible the second Bill O'Reilly, this man took 53 Test wickets and 476 first-class wickets, and also made over 4,000 first-class runs. With his fielding also well above average, he lays claim to being a genuine all-rounder. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Sydney, Mr. Kerry O'Keefe. What's your recollection of the 73 tour, Kerry?
Because I'm in an alcoholic haze at the moment, very vague. In fact,
in fairness to him, actually he hasn't been drinking very much. It's some of the fellas at his table that have been drinking and breathing on him. It's not fair.
If I stay in Adelaide with this lot any longer, I'll be a customer of the mission rather than a fundraiser. But funny enough, my recollections of that tour were basically the fact that I just don't know how we won. Because all we did was there were no one-day games. We just did our best with the Sheilers, the single blokes. We just waited on every British Airways flight that came in because we were scared of the big black zoo, so we never touched the locals. We got liquored up at the pool every day. We slogged their medium paces every game. I bowled them out, which was a total shock to everybody. We had a captain who thought PR were 2 letters late in the alphabet. We had 2 openers, Stackpole and Redpath, that looked like Laurel and Hardy and acted like them. Greg Chappell, 2 weeks into the tour, could have played for either side with his gollywog hair. We had a middle order player in Walters who was nicotine riddled and alcoholic. We had a puffy middle order player in Edwards who strummed a guitar and wrote sort of gay songs. Terry Jenner was made team treasurer, and the most common complaint was that none of us had any money. We had a wicket keeper who was 8 hamburgers over par. We had Jeff Hammond was called Crayfish because he was all arms and legs and had shit for brains. Dennis Lilly was our strike bowler. He was touted as a sex symbol. He's bald with false teeth and has an IQ around about his test bowling average. Who have I missed? Bob Massey was in hospital with food poisoning. He was discharged and found by a keg 12 hours later, blind. And we won. I can't believe it.
All of us here tonight know the feeling of a struggle, know the feeling of failure, but our next guest has perhaps felt it more acutely than most. It's always difficult for a public figure to escape the unfeeling media when something goes wrong, or to have to carry failures on his shoulders longer than most people. But there would not be one of us here tonight who would not applaud this man for what he has achieved over recent years, not to mention the achievements as one of this state's greatest spin bowlers. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me tremendous personal pleasure to welcome as our next guest my friend and colleague, Mr. Terry Jenner. How do you follow that?
Well, normally very easily because he didn't stay on long, but I can't remember laughing so much in all my life. I think we all sat here for the last almost 36 hours thinking that, what will Skull say? And while everyone else was working out what they'd say, assuming Skull wouldn't think about what he'd say, he was up in his room obviously preparing a speech. The thing is, the good thing, if I can say this, Rog, quite seriously, is that it's probably one of the funniest talks I've ever heard in my life, but it sort of goes with his bowling action, doesn't it? I can't imagine. A lot of people think that I was jealous of Kerry. No, I admired him so much because how he got any success with that action is beyond me. But he got some.
You're not an emotional man at all, are you?
Oh, you got me again, yeah. Dennis Lilly said, if you cry again, I'm going home. When you look out at the swarm of people here, and as I walked in early tonight looking around, and you see so many people you know, and there's two things that says. One is that there's a lot of people that support the mission regularly, and we know who they are, and they all know us. And the other thing is there's a lot of friendly faces in South Australia, and in getting this function together, it was just really, in so many ways, so easy, because we know that you all appreciate quality, and if we could bring you quality, and I'm sure the 73 Australian side was that, then you'd attend, and you have. And personally, the reward for me is seeing you all here.
10 years ago, if someone had told you you'd be working for the Adelaide City Mission, what would you have said?
I'm delighted. I mean, I know I've got a bit of a way to go before I got a direct line. But it's just the situation, I suppose, is that it first of all was employment for me. I'm not doing anything out of Christianity, I have to say that honestly. But Christianity is, in so many ways, the reason you do things. I mean, I spoke to a guy over here, Bob Ford. You won't mind me pointing out to him. We did a travel auction, and we talked one night, and he said, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, no, I'm not. And I'm teaching them about the real people. And he said, "Why aren't you a Christian?" And I said, "Well, because I don't drop to my knees every time someone says Jesus." And he said, "Well, nor do I, but I'm a Christian." So I said, "What's a Christian?" He said, "Someone that believes in God." And I said, "Well, I believe in God." So he said, "You're a Christian." So then I'm a Christian. How easy is that? Mind you, I kind of felt today that on a day that supposedly I had some involvement in, that Jesus would have given me a wicket.
Well, you certainly mentioned his name often enough. I'm not surprised you did.
You heard Ian Redpath talking, you know what he said, and he got two for. I just want to say to all my colleagues, thank you for supporting the Adelaide City Mission and this function. I want to thank all our sponsors that have come on board again. It's fantastic. From me to all my mates and to all of you, thanks very much. We've got some speakers coming up to follow that are absolutely fantastic. We have Maxie Walker and we have Ian Chappell. And Ian, last time, almost started the ball rolling. Tonight, I think rightfully, in a reunion of the 73 side, is going to finish it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest is a born entertainer, and why else would he have entered such an amazing bowling action other than to gain attention? He may not have been the prettiest bowler, he certainly wasn't the best batsman, and he may stretch the truth now and again, but he's one of the great characters of Australian society and loved by people from every walk of life. The program will tell you of his superb achievements as a medium-pace bowler for Victoria and Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight everybody's friend, Mr. Max Walker.
There's just so much, I suppose, that goes on a tour that basically stays there on the tour, and it really is only occasions like this then when you can share, what exactly went on. It's a pity that we've had to wait 19 years to have to share that. But it is terrific to be able to come together again. I suppose in terms of tours, there's always so much that goes on. For me, a young bloke from Hobart, Tasmania, just across Bass Strait was an enormous trip. But my goodness, you reckon when I arrived at Sabina Park, it didn't look different to Hobart. 10-foot high barbed wire fences, blokes hanging out of palm trees with flagons of rum, and I can remember running the gauntlet at fine leg, and one bloke said to me, he said, "Waka, waka, waka, you get one more wicket, you can have my wife." Well, geez. I was bowling with a rag doll at that stage. It was just rolled mud with a few grass shavings sort of sprinkled over the edge of it, and I looked round at this guy, and he was flat chat, getting his arm around his wife. She was a very big lady, I reckon 28 stone if she was an ounce. She had these huge brass earrings here, flared nostrils, and very tight knit pubic hair on the head. And for the life of me, I was that terrified I didn't look like taking another wicket. We come back for the test match at Sabina Park, and again, all my friends down there at fine leg, this bloke says, "Walk up, walk up. You're drinking my rum and drinking my rum." because everyone knows you only drink rum in the West Indies. Gosh, every airport that we got out of an aeroplane at, they introduced us to a rum, and it was about 500% proof, and I don't think anyone actually finished the second. So I pointed out, I said, you see the little bloke over there at first slip, Ian Chappell, if he sees me drinking rum, I'll never play cricket for Australia again. He said, man, he won't see you, he won't see you. Turned around to his mate in the back row. Down come the most enormous black umbrella you've ever seen. Through the barbed wire fence, 2 metres high. Through the 10-foot high barbed wire fence came this grotty green bottle of homemade rum. And I had a look at the neck of it, and it wasn't too flash. I thought to myself, gee, Keith Miller would have been the last bloke to have a drink out of this one. Now, I put my tongue in? Do I dip my finger in? I thought, no, I'll go for the whole catastrophe. So I squat down and you could feel it going down. 500% proof. The Aussie caps go, woo, 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 woo. Because no show without punch. First slip, second slip, mid-off, cover, mid-wicket. They've all turned around. I'm just minding my own business down there. 2 overs later, I'm having a rest in a back pocket, just backward a square leg. Little Alvin Calichuran, the left hand, has miscued the ball high in the air, and I've raced 30, 40 metres, maybe 50, possibly 60, I think it was. Dived full length, took a magnificent catch, rolled over 3 times to make it look even better. And it was incredible. I mean, every second guy, as we saw with the pictures coming back from the Caribbean on the recent tour over there, every second guy's mimicking the catch. They're out there like that. The eyeballs are bulging. They're out there. The noise is incredible. And I turned round to acknowledge the fact that it wasn't exactly natural ability. It had to have a bit to do with the rum, and I'm rubbing the old belly like this. And all of a sudden, there's a deathly silence. And I look back at the centre wicket area. I'm the only bloke in the entire ground who doesn't realise it's a no ball, and they've just run 3. But that was the beginning for me. It was an exciting time, as Greg Chappell said, the vibes. I can remember Dennis Lilly running out of space with his run-up. He's on a 16, 17, 18, 19. He's come to a pale green brick wall. It's about 14 foot high, and there's about 35 characters sitting on top of it. He marked the run-up just way up there, about 9 foot high. How he didn't do a groin, I know he broke down with a crook back, but it should have been a groin. How he actually pushed off the wall. And that crowd, as they chanted, let the tiger out, man, let him out, let him out. And away he went, whoa, right in the delivery stride, and as Greg said, deathly silence. And then as the ball climbed and went through to Marshy, just sensational, the roar erupted again. It was like a heartbeat and like a pulse over there. It was just fabulous. And of course we get down to Georgetown, Guyana. Now that's a pretty fantastic part of the world. That's not a tourist destination, Dennis, but then again you turned it into one. Dougie Walters and I shared the 12th man duties for the match against Guyana. And it was a pretty tough assignment, I suppose. On the first day, about an hour in, we were to provide drinks, and we had a little help of a little killer. I must have been 12 years old, I suppose. There were 3 big Tupperware jugs about this high. 2 of them were full of water, and 1 of them was full of Coca-Cola. And the little fella, quite naturally, he's picked up a handful of ice, he's thrown it into the water, thrown it into the second big Tupperware container of water, and Dennis and quite a few other players, they all liked Staminade. So naturally, a whole jar of Staminade goes in to the big container. Doesn't seem much, I suppose. I looked away for 30 seconds, and this little fella has driven the fist deep in to the container, stirring it round. I mean, there probably wasn't a spoon around, but as he dragged it out, the green stuff has run down over the arm, and I reckon I counted 7 scabs between there and there. Well, luckily we were batting at the time, and just offered the 2 not-out batsmen a couple of bits and pieces. Diarrhoea was another worry over there too. I think it was about 2 minutes past the start of play when TJ put his hand up and said, I'm having trouble keeping the tissue paper between the cheeks of the bum. That meant he wanted to get off. The toilet seat, dead set, didn't get cold for the next 2 hours. I run around out there, and you might laugh, but it's very hard if your tummy's upset. to stay in one piece. I mean, yeah, you ever tried to bowl cricket with a crook gut? I tell you, it's not a good thing. Georgetown, Guyana was fabulous because we won a test match down there. On the last day, I think we wanted around about 80, 90, it may have even been 100 runs. Redders and Stacky wiped them off, and Doug is the best setter-upper of a fishing trip. Even despite the lack of sleep, he was able to set it up, and we found ourselves out on the River Demerara around about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon in not much more than dugout logs. Sitting in the middle of the log is Dougie, and up the front, of course, was Ian Redpath, and every wave that we went over, the little Adam's apple's gone up and down. I was the biggest part I've read. And Terry Jenner, TJ, sitting in the back, he's just minding his own business, and the great big guy, and his man, about 6'8", with muscles rippling out of muscles, said to TJ, wouldn't leave them there fingers in that there water. TJ said, why? He said, them there piranha, they really love that white meat, man. They love that white meat. Oh, our hands come straight in, and TJ, quick as a flash, I suppose you got crocodiles and alligators over here too. And a big black man said, what do you think that is over there, a block of flats? 12-foot long alligator opened up, fantastic set of tonsils. The boys have dropped off real quick. Haven't wet the line, they want to go into shore. And that was when Doug basically thought, I'd love to have a stuffed alligator to take him home, pop him on top of the old TV set underneath the flying ducks on the wall. It'd be just, it really looked great. It was about 1.5 metres long, I think it was. Slippery, slimy, greasy alligator. And Doug was so infatuated with him, he nicknamed him Inchin after Inchin Ali, the left-arm spin bowler from Trinidad. Because Doug thought, well, he's a bit slippery, slimy, we'll have a bit of fun. And of course, one occasion he got in before TJ, which was very, very unusual, but there was a reason behind it. He got up the stairs, and we're staying at a place called the Star Hotel, Georgetown, Guyana. The 5-star hotel, but very, very dim stars. And Doug's up in stairs. He short-sheeted his roommate's bed, Terry Jenner, and what do you think he slipped in between those beautiful white, crisp sheets? Inchin Ali, the 4-foot-long, greasy, slimy alligator. Our TJ's waddled up the stairs. He's had a truckload on board, and he had verbal diarrhoea, new set of batteries, and all he wanted to do was just yap, 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 yap. And all Dougie wanted to do literally was to get him into the bed. You know, and he's that excited, but half an hour goes by, TJ's just having a yap. He don't want to get into bed. Finally it happens, and TJ, he drives the right leg in deep into the sheets, and then the left one, and of course, the inside of your thigh is fairly sensitive, isn't it, eh? The deeper he goes in, the closer the teeth get to the action. Doug knew he wasn't happy. He sprung bolt upright in bed. They didn't speak for 2 days after that. Dougie used to go to a lot of trouble to set up the practical jokes, and most of the stories you hear about Doug are true. I only roomed with him on one occasion in Hamilton, New Zealand, and it was about 5 o'clock. He walked in through the door, didn't knock, just sat on the edge of the bed, and there was this cough like that, and then off goes the can. He said, you awake, Tang? You awake? And I said, no. He said, I didn't think you was, but what about you want to have a drink? And he was just into it. It was dead set true, and how can you bowl quick with a bloke like that? If he'd have been a footballer, a bloke like Ron Barras, he would have been tearing his hair out now as a coach. But I don't know, it's very hard tonight at this stage as a night watchman to go in at 10 minutes to midnight, or gee, it's 20 past midnight now. Our captain Ian Chappell has got to wrap it up, and it's just not easy to put 3.5 months into 5 or 6 minutes. Each of the guys are very, very special to me. I feel that it's a privilege to have been part of that, and I hope that you feel privileged to be here tonight and just share some time with just a bunch of normal Aussie guys that gave the West Indies a dirty big one way back in 1973. Thank you very much, Charles.
Men you have listened to tonight form part of the most successful era of Australian cricket. There were some brilliant batsmen among them, There were certainly some magnificent bowling performances, and the fielding was always a joy to watch, particularly Ross Edwards in the covers. But none of us would dispute the fact that the central character of this team, as has been mentioned by a number of people tonight, the architect of its achievements, the inspiration whether the going was easy or tough, is the man who is our final guest tonight. Again, his achievements are well documented and set out clearly in our program, but I would like to pay a special tribute to you, Ian, in regard to what has happened today. It has been this man's empathy towards our work and the needy people we represent, and his great allegiance to an old friend whom he has supported through some tough times. That is one of the major reasons why this reunion has been held. Australia has not produced any better captain nor any more courageous batsman than our final guest. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the former Australian Test captain, Mr. Ian Chappell. Mate, you've got the last say.
Yeah, it's very rare that this bunch of pillocks that I played with 20 years ago ever protected me. Stackpole and Redpath were the openers on that tour. I was in pretty early on most occasions, as per usual. To be protected for once in my life, it's come about 20 years too late, but I guess better late than never.
Certainly a lot of plaudits have been given to you tonight for your captaincy. How do you feel when people say that you've been a great Australian Test captain?
Well, I mean, all I basically did was, try and do the best job I could. I guess with everything that I do, that's always been my ambition. I think, as you've seen tonight, they really are a decent bunch of guys. Redder, I think, so long ago when Redder spoke now, but I'm sure it was Red that said they were extremely competitive guys, and it wasn't difficult to captain that side because they were so competitive. Basically all I had to do was toss the coin, pin up the batting order, and in fact, I didn't even have to pin the batting order up because, where was it, Tobago? I made a mistake at some stage or other in the tour. I told Dennis Lilly that he could open the batting in Tobago because he's a great team man, Dennis Lilly. He's a lot of things. He was a great fast bowler, but he's also a great team man. I think that showed out on that tour, the fact that he hardly played, but he came to me and he said, mate, I can't bowl, but, if you need to rest anybody, I can play as a fieldsman and a batsman. And I said, well, I accept your offer, Dennis, to play you as a fieldsman. For some strange reason, he was upset by that, and so, you've got to placate him because he's about 2 stone heavier than me. He's a hell of a lot stronger than me, particularly when he's drinking that 150% proof rum. And so I said, well, okay, you can open the batting in Tobago. And so when I walked into the dressing room in Tobago, the batting order was already pinned up, so I didn't even have to do that. And I think it read Lilly Redpath. So they were a pretty easy bunch to captain. As I say, I just tried to do best job I possibly could. I was lucky that I had a very competitive bunch of guys to play with, and I guess probably embarrasses me a bit if people say I'm a great Australian captain. I just sleep pretty well at night because I know that I did the best I possibly could.
In the 28th of March 1973, we've documented in our program tonight as a significant day for Australian cricket. Do you see it that way? What's your recollection of that day?
I would say it was the second best test match that I ever played in. The best test match that I played in was at the Oval in 1972 because I thought that was the most important test match in the formation of this team. Trinidad was a fantastic game of cricket. To win a close cricket match like that is fantastic. My memories of the 28th of March, no, actually we better make it the 29th of March. My best memories are of the 29th of March because, as you've already gathered
from hearing the guys come before me, you know, we did tend to stay up a little bit, and I think one of the great things about not only this team but the team that we had in the 70s was we were a good cricket team, and I think it was very important that we knew how to celebrate our victories, because you work very hard together as a team, and I would hate to think that at the end of the 5 days you just sort of sat down, packed your bag, had one beer and said, righto, let's go on to the next thing. You know, it was a special thing for us to win a match. I mean, you saw Redder tonight, and Redder, his tradition is always to have a drink and to have a cigar when Australia wins a test match. And that was always a thing, and Redder basically a non-drinker. So that explains why he said what he did, because what he meant to say was that Dennis Lillee is a gun-fast bowler, but he didn't say that. Now, Ian Redpath was, if we'd have been running a book in this side, I mean, what, with John Benno, Greg Chappell, I suppose I might have to include myself in the list of swearers. Maybe I'd run probably about third in that lot, I reckon. If you were running a book, Ian Redpath had to be 1,000,000 to 1 to say one of the 2 unusables at an Adelaide City Mission function. But there we are, the 1,000,000 to 1 shot got up. Because we'd won a game. Okay, it was only, you know, a game at the Adelaide Oval, but that sort of is the tradition, and that is the feeling of, of these teams. And my memory, as I say, of the 29th of March 1973 is the Queen's Park Hotel, because that's where we finished after JB's discotheque, and John Benno. It wasn't so much that John Benno actually took over the joint, there was just a small part of the joint that he tried to buy that night. But when we got back to the Queen's Park Hotel, there was only 3 of us left, and this is the biggest surprise of the night. This is probably even a longer shot than Ian Redpath's 1,000,000 to 1. Of the 3, Doug Walters wasn't one. It was Rod Marsh, Dennis Lillee and myself. Now earlier we'd had the celebration function, or it started in the dressing room, but then it had moved to Bill Jacobs' room, and Bill Jacobs' room was, I reckon, about 2 inches deep in booze, you know, where I don't know how that happened either, because we didn't spill too much usually, we, you know, concentrated on our drinking. But anyhow, we finished up back in this room, and Dennis Lillee, he was basically a non-drinker in those days, but we'd convinced him that it was important as a fast bowler to put something back in. And I think he had been into the overproof rum again. And he said, you two, and he's got us, you know, we're holding him up, I think, basically. And he said, you two good blokes, he said, but we got to go to a discotheque, you see. And we said, look, you know, we've just been to a bloody discotheque. We're back here in a quiet place having a chat, having a drink. No, you've got to take me to a discotheque. So, I mean, once he decides we've got to go to a discotheque. So I said to Bacchus, righto, mate, I'm not leaving this joint now. I'm back here, I'm staying. But we've got to take him to a discotheque. So I said, what we'll do, we'll walk him around, it was a sort of a square section just outside the room there. And I said, we'll walk him around there a couple of times. When we get back into the room, I said, you turn the radio up really loud. I'll get the lights and flick them on and off, and he'll think he's in a discotheque, you see. So we did exactly that. We walked him around twice, and his big worry was that we were going to leave him. Fellas, don't leave me there, will you? Don't leave me there. No, Book, we won't leave you there. So we got him back, and we sat him on the bed in I'm not sure whether it was his own room, Bill Jacobs' room, or Rodney Marsh's room, but he wasn't far from his own room, and as far as he was concerned, he was in a discotheque. And the light was flicking on and off, and Rodney had the music up really loud. Dennis had a fine time in the discotheque. This is a bit like you, Bomber. This is a confession. Book, I'm not sure that you ever knew that you weren't in a discotheque, did you? But, yeah, I mean, that's my great memories of not only this team, but, you know, the teams during the 70s, of the celebrations that we had when we won matches, because, to me, that was a very important part of the Australian team, was our ability to play well, but then to enjoy those victories and to celebrate them properly. I think it's tremendous what's happened the 2 years. Last year, Legends 1 and now Legends 2, the cricket match, the dinner, and I would like to thank everybody involved. And what I'd like to do finally is ask all of the 72, 73 side of the West Indies, including Bill Jacobs, Dick Tucker and Gareth Jones. I'd like all the guys to come up here, please.
Did you ever realise you were...
No. What I would like to do is to get the 72, 73 side to just drink a toast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. We've enjoyed it. I hope you have. Thank you.
Well done. Thanks, Ian. Thank you.
Good on you, TJ.
How does it rate with your ovals, the Adelaide Oval?
I didn't like it. I could never made a run in it, TJ, but I said it was beating. It's a world famous oval, of course. But it's funny how you have grounds like that you sort of can't fire on. And I didn't make a heap of other grounds I like, but it wasn't the oval's fault. I can tell you, it was lovely.
Welcome back to the Adelaide Oval.
Thanks, Terry. It's nice to be back. It's been a few years since we walked out in the middle.
What was it like walking out with Ian to the Adelaide Oval just the one more time?
Yeah, it was good. I was a little bit worried whether he was going to back up and respond when I called, and I wasn't disappointed. He didn't.
There was a lot of hesitation in the room because you two, when you were playing for South Australia, were renowned for occasionally running the other out.
We had a few moments in the early days. I think we got things sorted out after a while. Ian started to listen to me, and everything was all right after that.
Yeah, the Oval has a presence, doesn't it? Did you feel that today?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Actually, it was very different with the Sir Donald Bodman stand in the background. I hadn't played on the Oval since that stand had been finished. It gave a slightly different feel about the thing, but you know, it brought back a lot of happy memories. I mean, I'd spent quite a few hours out in the middle of the ground over the years, so it was nice to do it for one more time, but the way it felt, it may well be the last time.
The reunion last night, was it great to see the guys again?
Oh, it certainly was, and it's a pity we don't see one another a little more often. We might get to sleep a little earlier. I found it very hard to find that bed last night, but it was great to see the boys, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we do see them travel as we travel around Australia from time to time. You see them one-on-one, but to get all the guys in a group, the euphoria was brilliant. It was almost like being back in the West Indies again, wasn't it?
Oh, it was absolutely great. I mean, to have them all in one room, you've not only got the one troublemaker, as you say, when you strike them one-on-one around the States, but when you've got a dozen of them together, and you can't avoid them all. Someone's going to catch up with you before the night's finished, and I think I've tried to catch up with a lot of them.
Do you remember playing here when they had grass?
Well, they always had a good covering of grass, but I mean, it is a greener colour now, and I think the wicket still plays as it was perhaps 25 years ago when I first played here. But it's an absolute credit to the ground staff here at Adelaide and the curator for the magnificent job he's done for many years.
Doug, thanks very much for giving your time for charity one more time in Adelaide, and I'm hoping somewhere in the future we can have another match, and of course you'd be one of the very first that we'd invite, because always a popular member of the cricketing public.
Well, it's always my pleasure to be here, and if there's another charity game on, then I'll be there.
Thanks, Doug. Ian, on the outside, people would think of you as being a bit of perhaps a hard man, a hard taskmaster. We get a reunion together like this. What does it mean to you?
Gee. I suppose the first thing is I'm fortunate in my job that I still see a lot of the guys on a fairly regular basis, but there are some that I don't see so much of. So I guess the first thing is it's good to see them again, and I guess the opportunity to talk bullshit with them, and joke. I mean, you don't talk much cricket really. It's sort of remember when we won here and that celebration. I think they're probably the most enjoyable things. Talking about remember that celebration we had in Trinidad when we won, and the one we had in Sydney when we won the Ashes back, and just remembering those sorts of times. I guess that's the good fun of it.
Was there a special feeling walking out to bat with Greg on the Adelaide Oval again?
I was a bit surprised actually today. I think that's the first time I've batted with Greg and felt like I was hitting him better than him. That was probably a bit of a thrill. But it was interesting. He said to me after about 3 or 4 balls, he said, I'm finding it hard to watch the ball out of the hand. And that's the thing that I find the most difficult when you don't play. I've probably got a bit of an advantage over him actually because I play a lot more tennis than he does. And of course that's, you've got to watch the server throwing the ball up. Whereas Greg's more of a golfer these days, and of course you're not, you're just looking at a still ball. So maybe that was the advantage I had over him today. Maybe also I've had more practice at late nights and batting the next day than what Greg had. Well, I should say batting the same day here is what Greg has. I'm perhaps a bit better practiced at that.
I was standing at slips when Dennis Lilly was bowling, and Rod Marsh said he really believes he could still play first-class cricket today. What would you say to that?
Well, okay, those statements all sound very nice, but you see, what you're forgetting is that there are 2 parts to it. There is the mental part and there is the physical part. And I just think of it myself. It reminds me, if I'm stupid enough to ever play in these games, it reminds me of why I retired. Because it was the fielding in the end that got me. And Dennis is sort of saying, he's got a bit of a twinge up there. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in the game. That's mentally you may sort of think, well, yes, I could do this or yes, I could do that, but physically, and also it's the time involved to get you back to that sort of physical. That would take 6 to 9 months, and you'd probably break down umpteen times trying to do it. And why would you want to do it anyhow?
Well, I know you played here last year, but did you feel that the batting was different from, say, 10 years ago because the ground has changed, because of the stand at the other end? Did it feel different?
Batting was different today than what it was 20 years ago.
Not to the people on the boundary, because you may not have hit the ball as often as sweetly, but the style was still there. And people say, I remember Ian Chappell doing that. I heard you say when you came in the rooms. That's the first straight drive you've played for 20 years.
I'm a fool there. When I was young and I could run, I used to hit the ball to the side boundaries, because I was a cutter and a puller and a hooker. Now I've got old and I can't run, and what am I doing? I'm hitting straight drives. I'm a fool.
Ian, just in closing, you're held in such esteem by all the players that played under you in that 70s era, and by inviting you to play, you accepting, it means all the other guys follow. And so on behalf of the Adelaide City Mission, I would like to publicly thank you for helping us pull this game together and pull all the guys together and help us raise probably in excess of $45,000. And your friendship means a lot. Thanks.
Thanks, TJ. It's a pleasure. Probably the biggest kick I get out of it, I guess, is apart from, as I said, talking about the tours and all that sort of business, the fact that a lot of people helped me when I was young. If I hadn't have had that sort of help, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to play here. And I guess I just feel that it's my way of sort of repaying people like Lynn Fuller who helped me. The hours that Lynn Fuller put in, I could never repay him, but I sort of feel like this is sort of at least repaying some of the debt.
Thanks, mate.
Pleasure.
We slogged their medium paces every game. I'd bowl them out, which is a total shock to everybody. We had a captain who thought PR were 2 letters late in the alphabet. We had two openers, Stackpole and Redpath, that looked like Laurel and Hardy and acted like them. Greg Chappell, 2 weeks into the tour, could have played for either side with his gollywog hair. We had a middle order player in Walters who was nicotine riddled and alcoholic. We had a puffy middle order player in Edwards who strummed a guitar and wrote sort of gay songs. Terry Jenner was made team treasurer, and the most common complaint was that none of us had any money. We had a wicket keeper who was 8 hamburgers over par. We had Jeff Hammond was called Crayfish because he was all arms and legs and had shit for brains. Dennis Sully was our strike bowler. He was touted as a sex symbol. He's bald with false teeth and has an IQ around about his test bowling average. Who have I missed? Bob Massey was in hospital with food poisoning. He was discharged and found by a keg 12 hours later, blind. And we won. I can't believe it.